That night in Vegas, nobody expected Elvis's reaction, especially not in front of 20,000 people. The International Hotel was packed to capacity, every seat filled with fans who had traveled from across the country to see the king perform. But what started as just another spectacular show would become one of the most unforgettable moments in music history. Elvis was in the middle of "Love Me Tender" when it happened. His voice, smooth as silk, was carrying across the massive showroom when suddenly, a slurred voice cut through the music like a knife. "You ain't nothing but a washed-up has-been." The words came from somewhere in the front rows, harsh and bitter, spoken by a man who had clearly had too much to drink. But what Elvis did next would silence 20,000 people and change one man's life forever. If you want to see how the king of rock and roll turned a moment of cruelty into an act of grace that still moves people to tears today, keep watching because this story will restore your faith in humanity. It was February 1972, and Elvis Presley was at the peak of his Las Vegas residency. The International Hotel had become his second home, where he performed 2 shows a night to sold-out crowds who worshipped every note he sang. These weren't just concerts, they were religious experiences where thousands of fans came to witness the man who had changed music forever. But behind the glitter and glamour, Elvis carried a burden that few people understood. The pressures of fame, the isolation of stardom, and the constant demand to be perfect had taken their toll. Yet night after night, he stepped onto that stage and gave everything he had to his fans, because he understood something profound: music wasn't just entertainment, it was healing. That particular evening, Elvis had noticed something different in the crowd. In the third row, slightly to his left, sat a middle-aged man who looked out of place among the enthusiastic fans. His clothes were wrinkled, his hair disheveled, and even from the stage, Elvis could see the telltale signs of someone drowning their sorrows in alcohol. The man's eyes held a pain that Elvis recognized all too well. As Elvis moved through his setlist, he found himself glancing repeatedly toward that troubled soul. There was something about the man's posture, the way he sat hunched over as if carrying the weight of the world, that tugged at Elvis's heartstrings. The king had always possessed an uncanny ability to sense pain in others, perhaps because he carried so much of it himself. The show was going beautifully. Elvis was in top form, his voice powerful and emotional as he delivered one hit after another. The audience was mesmerized, hanging on every word, every gesture. But as he began the opening notes of "Love Me Tender," one of his most beloved ballads, something shifted in the atmosphere. Elvis had just reached the second verse when the drunk man's voice shattered the reverent silence of the showroom. "You ain't nothing but a washed-up has-been. My wife left me for trash like you." The words were slurred but clearly audible, cutting through the music like broken glass. The man had stood up, swaying slightly, pointing an accusing finger at the stage. "You ruined my life with your stupid songs." The entire showroom gasped. Security guards immediately began moving toward the disturbance, ready to remove the heckler. The band, startled, looked to Elvis for direction, their instruments faltering. 20,000 people held their breath, waiting to see how the king would handle this unprecedented interruption. But Elvis did something no one expected. He stopped singing mid-verse, gently placed his microphone on its stand, and instead of signaling security to remove the man, he held up his hand to stop them. The arena fell into a silence so complete you could have heard a pin drop. Elvis walked to the edge of the stage, his sequin jumpsuit catching the spotlights as he moved closer to the man who had insulted him. His face showed no anger, no indignation. Instead, his eyes reflected something far more powerful: compassion. "Sir," Elvis said, his voice carrying clearly through the wireless microphone clipped to his collar, "I can see you're hurting. Why don't you tell me what's really wrong?" The drunk man, suddenly faced with Elvis's gentle response instead of the anger he expected, began to crumble. His defiance melted away, replaced by raw, overwhelming pain. She said she loved your music more than she loved me," he sobbed, no longer shouting but speaking in a broken whisper that the sensitive stage microphones picked up. 23 years of marriage, and she left me for dreams of you. What happened next would become the moment that defined not just that night, but Elvis's entire legacy of compassion. Subscribe and comment now, because you're about to witness the most incredible part of this story. Elvis didn't hesitate for even a second. He walked down the steps at the side of the stage, something he had never done before in the middle of a song. The security guards parted like the Red Sea as the king of rock and roll made his way through the crowd toward the broken man. When Elvis reached him, he didn't speak immediately. Instead, he placed his hand on the man's shoulder, a gesture so simple yet so profound that many people in the audience began to tear up just watching it unfold. The man looked up at Elvis, his face streaked with tears, his eyes wide with disbelief that the very person he had just insulted was now standing beside him with kindness. "What's your name, friend?" Elvis asked softly. "Jimmy," the man whispered. "Jimmy Patterson." "Well, Jimmy Patterson," Elvis said, "I want you to know something. Music isn't meant to take love away from people. It's meant to bring it into their lives. If your wife left, it wasn't because of any song I ever sang. Sometimes people just grow apart, and that's painful, but it's not your fault, and it's not mine either." The entire showroom was transfixed. This wasn't part of any script or planned performance. This was real, raw humanity playing out in front of thousands of witnesses. Cell phones weren't common in 1972, but every person in that audience would carry this moment in their memory forever. Elvis reached into his pocket and pulled out a white silk handkerchief, one of his signature accessories. He handed it to Jimmy, who took it with trembling hands. "I want you to keep this," Elvis said. "And every time you look at it, I want you to remember that you matter. Your pain matters. And there are people in this world who care about you, even if it doesn't feel that way right now." Jimmy clutched the handkerchief as if it were a lifeline. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry for what I said." Elvis shook his head. "You don't need to apologize to me, Jimmy. You're hurting, and hurt people sometimes say things they don't mean. But I want you to make me a promise." "Anything," Jimmy said. "Promise me you'll get some help. Promise me you'll talk to someone about this pain you're carrying. And promise me you'll try to find the love in your life again, even if it's not the love you lost." But the most incredible part of this story was still to come. The part that no one, not even Elvis's own band, saw coming. Elvis helped Jimmy back to his seat, making sure he was comfortable before he made his way back to the stage. But instead of simply resuming the show, Elvis did something that would become legendary in the annals of live performance history. He picked up his microphone and looked out at the audience, all 20,000 faces staring back at him in complete silence. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice carrying a weight of emotion that made everyone lean forward, "what just happened here tonight is more important than any song I could ever sing. We just witnessed something beautiful, a man brave enough to show his pain and ask for help, even if he didn't realize that's what he was doing." The crowd began to murmur in agreement, many wiping tears from their eyes. "Jimmy Patterson," Elvis continued, looking directly at the man, "you said my music ruined your life. Well, I want to give you a chance to make new memories with it. This next song is for you, and I want everyone in this room to sing it with me, not for me, but for Jimmy, and for everyone who's ever felt lost and alone." Elvis began to sing, "Can't Help Falling in Love," but this time it was different. His voice carried a tenderness that seemed to embrace not just Jimmy, but every person in that vast showroom. One by one, voices joined in from the audience. First a few, then dozens, then hundreds, until all 20,000 people were singing together in a chorus of compassion that filled the Las Vegas International Hotel with something magical. Jimmy Patterson sat in his seat, tears streaming down his face, clutching Elvis's handkerchief as thousands of strangers sang to him, for him, with him. In that moment, his pain didn't disappear, but it was transformed into something bearable, something shared, something that connected him to the humanity around him. When the song ended, the ovation lasted for 7 full minutes. But it wasn't just applause for Elvis, it was applause for Jimmy's courage, for the power of forgiveness, for the reminder that beneath all our differences, we're all just people trying to find our way through life's difficulties. Share this story and subscribe, because this moment changed not just one man's life, but the way an entire generation thought about compassion and human connection. What happened to Jimmy Patterson after that night became the stuff of legend itself. The story of his encounter with Elvis spread far beyond that Las Vegas showroom. Within weeks, Jimmy had received hundreds of letters from people who had heard about what happened, offering support, friendship, and encouragement. Jimmy kept his promise to Elvis. He sought help for his drinking, started attending support groups, and slowly began to rebuild his life. The white silk handkerchief became his most treasured possession, a tangible reminder of the night when the king of rock and roll showed him that his life still had value. But the impact went far beyond one man. Elvis himself was profoundly affected by the encounter. His band members and backup singers later recalled that something changed in Elvis after that night. His performances became more intimate, more connected to individual faces in the crowd. He began to actively look for people who seemed to be struggling, and he found ways to reach out to them during his shows. The handkerchief Jimmy received wasn't just a piece of fabric, it became a symbol of Elvis's belief that every person deserved to be seen, to be acknowledged, to be loved despite their flaws and pain. Jimmy eventually had the handkerchief framed, and it hung in his living room until the day he died, 32 years later, surrounded by friends and family who had come into his life in the years after that transformative night in Vegas. Elvis's response to Jimmy Patterson became one of the most talked about moments in entertainment history, not because of any musical performance, but because of what it revealed about the man behind the legend. It showed that beneath the rhinestones and the spotlights, Elvis Presley possessed something far more valuable than talent. He had a heart that could see past anger to the pain beneath, and the courage to respond with love instead of defensiveness. Years later, when people asked Jimmy to describe that night, he would always say the same thing: Elvis didn't just give me a handkerchief. He gave me back my belief that I was worth something. He reminded me that even in my darkest moment, there was still light to be found. The story became a defining moment not just for Elvis's career, but for his legacy. It showed that true greatness isn't measured in record sales or sold-out shows, but in moments of genuine human connection. It demonstrated that the greatest performances aren't always the ones where every note is perfect, but the ones where hearts are touched and lives are changed. News of that extraordinary night spread like wildfire throughout the entertainment world. Fellow musicians, actors, and performers began sharing their own stories of Elvis's behind-the-scenes kindness. Frank Sinatra, who had initially been critical of Elvis's music, publicly praised his class and character after hearing about the Jimmy Patterson incident. Johnny Cash called it the most Christ-like thing I've ever seen a performer do. The Las Vegas entertainment community was particularly moved by Elvis's actions. Other headline acts at major venues began incorporating similar moments of connection into their own shows, though none could replicate the authentic spontaneity of what Elvis had done. The International Hotel received thousands of letters from fans around the world, praising not just Elvis's music, but his humanity. Jimmy Patterson himself became somewhat of a local celebrity in his hometown. Local newspapers interviewed him about his encounter with Elvis, and he used the attention to advocate for mental health awareness and addiction recovery. He would often end his speaking engagements by showing Elvis's handkerchief and saying, "This piece of cloth reminds me that no matter how far you fall, there's always someone willing to help you back up if you're brave enough to accept it." That night in Las Vegas, Elvis Presley proved that the title, King of Rock and Roll, was just the beginning of his story. His real crown was earned through acts of kindness, moments of grace, and the understanding that fame and talent are only meaningful when they're used to lift others up. The International Hotel continued to host Elvis's residency for years to come, but everyone who worked there agreed that no night was quite like the night Elvis stopped his show to save a soul. It reminded everyone present that music, at its best, isn't just about entertainment, it's about connection, healing, and the profound truth that we're all in this life together. Jimmy Patterson's story became a testament to the power of unexpected kindness and the reminder that sometimes, the people who seem the angriest are actually the ones who are hurting the most. Elvis saw past the insult to the pain, and in doing so, He gave us all a lesson in compassion that continues to inspire people more than 50 years later. Subscribe and share this story so that Elvis's message of love and understanding can reach even more hearts today.